Right, hello everyone and welcome to the Student Art Podcast. I'm your host Ross Baxter and today is episode 42 of the series. And today we've got an incredible guest for you, we've got an awesome artist for you. We have Hannah Watts on the show. Hannah is a senior environment and prop artist. How you doing, Hannah? Thanks for coming on.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Anytime, it really means a lot for you to come on. Really looking forward to hearing about your story and just your journey, and most importantly, just your thoughts on student education. And hearing about like all these things together would be really cool. If you're tuning in, so the podcast is a weekly series where I bring on guests from the games and film industry and just hear about their journey overall. The podcast is live on 9 platforms, so we're live on Anchor, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Breaker, Overcast, Pocket Cast, Radio Public, and last but not least, we've got Stitcher. Obviously, the main platform for this podcast is YouTube, so if you're tuning in, please don't forget to subscribe. It would be much appreciated, and leave a like if you enjoyed today's episode. But with all that said, let's get into the fun part. Let's talk about Hannah and so forth. So, as always, Hannah, just tell us a wee bit about yourself, what you do exactly.
Sure. I'm a senior artist at Coatsink. That's a small indie studio. Well, it's about small to medium size now in the north of England. And I recently became art lead on an unannounced project, which is on consoles, which is nice because
Awesome.
A lot of the past projects have all been mobile VR and VR games. That's what Coatsink specializes in. I've been there almost 4 years now.
Wow, awesome. Because that's the great thing about so obviously every time I do a podcast, I always look into research about the guests and so forth. But you've literally done everything, and the great thing about when I was checking on your LinkedIn is you literally specialize in so many different things. So it's not just modeling, not just prop art. It's you've done am I correct, website stuff, and then UI. There's a bit of everything you've kind of explored into.
Yeah, it was never intentional. I actually did a talk about this at Abate in November last year about how I accidentally became a bit of a jack of all trades. Obviously, I do specialize mostly in 3D, and that's where my passion is.
Awesome.
But yes, I've done logo design for not just Coatsink. I've done it for not even games as well. I've done logo design for kind of a card game company, a dance studio, someone who made knitted goods. I did a logo for them.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a bit of everything. And then, I did. I worked as a sort of QA / sort of designer for a web design agency. In between 4J Studios and Coatsink, I did a little stint there, and that actually taught me a lot about production in terms of agile.
Okay.
Which I think not every artist coming out of uni is necessarily aware of. So that was really good because it meant when I went into Coatsink, I knew a lot about Jira and sprint planning and how to estimate your work, time it takes and stuff. So
definitely.
Yeah, it's a bit of an unconventional path in the industry, a bit of everything, but it seems to be working out. So
definitely. No, but that's the great thing because so this is the thing I like to highlight the most when I do a podcast. So at the end of the day, the thing's all about story and the different journey, if you know what I mean. So everyone has this sort of for example, you were just saying there about being at Abate and doing a talk, and you had a surprise twist, and things change all the time, and that's the great thing about for example your path. This is our other cool thing that I really liked is do you know all the studios that you've been at? They have so awesome names as well. I know this is a random thing, but it's there's so many for example, Dundee is a culprit of this because we both went to Dundee, and so we both studied at Abate, and Abate have created. By the way, if you're listening, and you're looking to get into games, I highly recommend checking out Dundee, an awesome place, by the way. We'll talk about Abate as well if you're okay with that because you went to Abate.
Yeah, that's perfect.
But yeah, as when it comes to the podcast, I kind of like to stick to the same sort of 4 questions. So starting off, so the first question I always like to ask is there anything you wish you learned when you were studying at university?
There is a few different things, yeah. Definitely more hard skills in terms of 3D. So I think I went to uni Abertay. I started in 2010 and I graduated in 2014.
Mm-hmm.
And my understanding is that while I was there, the course was going on a bit of a shift.
Okay.
So there were definitely some areas that I think weren't covered that probably should have been. The kind of high poly modeling and low poly modeling, and they weren't covered at all. So in my third year, I did Dare to be Digital,
Mm-hmm.
and I met a bunch of students, and I was watching them model, and I had no idea what a normal math was. Like, I'd never heard of it.
Right.
So we'd only been using like bump maps and diffuse.
Gee, I haven't heard the word. Yeah, bump map. Haven't heard that one in a long time.
Yeah. So I'd never heard of like the high poly workflow at all. So I learned that over the summer. While even though we were doing a 2D game like on the side, I was learning like all this kind of pipeline stuff I didn't know about. So yeah, I mean that was like 9 years ago now, so I'm sure it's probably different, but I do wish I'd learned a bit more like technical stuff like that.
Yeah,
like how to break down models as well. Because I was, for the longest of times, I thought a mesh had to be all in one. Like, I didn't know you could have like sub meshes and parts of meshes, and I thought it all had to be modeled and
all
welded
combined,
together. Yeah, and I remember trying to make a chair, and I just could not figure out, because obviously if you think about a chair, it's made of like loads of different planks of wood and bits and bobs. Trying to weld all those as like an amateur modeler.
Oh my gosh, that'd be so painful.
I hated it. I was like, I couldn't see why people enjoyed it.
Yeah.
So fiddly. And I remember when I found out that, yeah, you model things kind of as they're constructed in real life, or you should model that way. It was like this mind-blowing revelation.
Everything just kind of, you're like, oh my gosh, I can finally now enjoy it. Everything like clicked together.
Yeah, totally. I was like, it makes so much sense now.
Definitely. No, but that's I'm actually really glad you said that, because so for example, I'm working on this sort of so I'm doing a prop at the moment. So I'm making so I got my environment project that I'm working on, but on the side I'm doing this like axe and like, just making like assets and stuff. And like I was actually in this mindset last night and the night before. Like, so do you know, like in like so for example, I'm making an axe from The Hobbit, and like so the Lord of the Rings sort of world. And for some reason in my head, I'm always thinking about like it all having to be like together as one, like you're saying, and like that's never the case. Is like you just have to like mesh, combine and stuff, and then you can just like obviously prepare it for game ready. If you know what I mean. As long as it's clean, you're fine.
Yeah, totally. And it makes it so much easier for like when you're baking and stuff. Now that you've got things in like Substance and Marmoset where you can bake by the mesh name, like baking has never been easier. So I learned to bake an X normal, made my own cages and stuff. And fighting with artifacts was just like you expected that to happen, but now it's like it's quite rare that I'll have to fix artifacts now.
Yeah,
and it's all because you can model and bake that way. It's it's really nice.
But like that's the thing. So like obviously like speaking on the whole topic of pipeline. So obviously I graduated from Abertay 2 years ago, and so like I really enjoyed Abertay, and I was really fortunate with what they did and so forth. However, I would agree in the sense that, so obviously like pipeline's difficult in the sense that because obviously there's so many different areas to cover, there's a lot for teachers to obviously have to keep up to date with. But I think like I don't know if I was having to like maybe like obviously it'd be great to hear what your thoughts on this. So obviously like well actually like speaking of pipeline, like what is your what is your pipeline what is it like, what is your sort of workflow?
For me personally or at work?
Just personally.
So I work high to low poly. So I'll start by, generally I spend time getting blueprints of like the item that I'm making. So if I'm making like something that exists in real life, like my till, for example, or a radio, I'll find like actual product specification blueprints because they exist for almost anything. That tends to give you like, obviously it gives you like the orthographic views and like the dimensions, and sometimes they give like cross sections, and they're really useful for getting your block out done. So yeah, I'll do that. I'll do my block out, and then I'll work high to low poly. And because I work in Max and I obviously make use of the modifiers, a lot of the like the base meshes that become the high poly, I then duplicate them over, and I just get rid of the modifiers and I use them to start constructing the low poly. So I try and work as non-destructive as possible.
Awesome. No, because that's the thing I'm still trying to get up to date with. So I've recently just I'm not sure if I can say it. Can I say it publicly? I'll be careful what I say here. So
Okay.
so I'll just keep it simple. So I'm having to learn 3ds Max now. So I've always used Maya, and I did use Max my first year, and I'm not gonna lie. So I used to love Max way more than Maya. I think Max was more just logical. There was just more sense to it. Obviously, in a modeling standpoint, it just makes more sense. It's more of sort of like an Autodesk sort of approach, or Inventor and sort of like CAD sort of system, as in like it's very mathematical in a way, but it's still obviously creative and it gives you that freedom still. But the only thing I'm a bit cautious still to learn is the modifiers, and like trying to understand like how all that like falls into play with workflow, because it's like, do you know when you start a new software, it's always like very daunting.
Yes. Oh, totally. I remember when I first learned Substance, and it was just UI everywhere. I didn't know what I was doing.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'd say even most of the modifiers I probably don't use. Like, I probably don't know what half of them are. I've got like the 10 that I probably use the most. The rest I just ignore.
Well, that's a good. No, I'm really happy you said that, because when it comes to like, for example, so every week I ask like so I do this thing now called question time. So I've only done 2 episodes so far. So basically, like, I open up my channel to all my viewers. It's pretty much like a Q&A, and I ask them like, what sort of questions would you like me to ask my guests and stuff. And like the one that I've realized, even like when I was a student, like everyone tends to overthink, is like they always ask like what sort of secret tools do you use, like what kind of, like, how do you make this like magic piece. And I'm just like, it's actually really simple in the sense that like I don't use like so many tools, like you just said there, like you don't, like, there's no need to overthink it, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure what your thoughts are on that. I know it's a bit of a random one.
Like it comes with time. Like, I definitely use more modifiers now than I did, but I always think you have to earn your tools in a way. It's the same with like hardware as well.
Yeah.
I think worrying about having the best hardware or using the best software, and you get these like, oh, which package is better, this or this. At the end of the day, we're making art, and not everything can be automated, and nor should it be. So there is always going to be a bit of graft in there. So yeah, like, don't worry about all these like tools and fancy bits and bobs. Like, find what works for you, and over time, you'll find new scripts or new tools will come out that maybe will make something that you've done faster. But I definitely think you should like earn it, I guess, like learn how to do it before trying to like cheat your way around it. Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, that's a great point, because like when it comes to so I've brought up like, how can I say it, like a range of different variations of this topic, because there's so many different people. Well, a lot of people, how can I say it? It's like so many people ask so many different questions that are being answered all the time, but it's like hearing it from the professionals. Like, that's why I do the podcast, is like I ask the same question a lot, because like once people finally hear it from so many people, they finally, like, it just kicks in and they realize, right, I'm just gonna have to do it, if that makes sense. Because like the one that I've brought up a lot on the podcast is when people ask about, like, oh my gosh, is for example, is Megascans taking over my job? And I'm like, no, just relax. It's okay. It's just another tool. And I don't know if it's just because maybe they're getting misguided, whether it's through teaching or just how they're researching. But like, for example, when I was at university, I was always kind of blessed, because I always knew what I wanted to do. So even if I wasn't getting taught it, I was always doing, like, I'm not sure what you were like, but I was always doing 3D non-stop outside, if you know what I mean.
I was the opposite. I coasted a little bit at uni. It's only since I graduated that I really pulled my socks up. But yeah, I'm like that now. I'm always doing like 3D in the week and stuff.
No, but that's the great thing as well. So everyone who's by the way, I haven't even said everyone who's tuning in. So all 4,500 of you who's been listening, go spam her follow button. I'll be showing all her social media, by the way, on the background. You'll see it right now. So go give her a follow on ArtStation, Twitter. Do you use Instagram?
I do, yeah. Not for 3D. That's
okay.
I use Instagram for all my paintings.
All right. Okay. Awesome. So
yeah, they're just for my hobby, really. But yeah, you can follow that if you want.
So everyone, make sure to go check that out. And I should have said that at the start. I do apologise. But so the next question I always like to ask on the podcast is, obviously, did you think university, like, I know we've kind of covered it, but did university teach you how to be ready for the industry? And if not, is there anything you would like to maybe be shown or taught, should I say?
I think it did, in maybe like unexpected ways. So I'd say, in terms of my portfolio coming out of uni, I don't know that it was completely where, yeah, I don't think I was fully hireable.
Okay.
But in terms of like soft skills, uni taught me how to like be out my comfort zone. It taught me like that moving across the country is not as terrifying, because obviously a lot of jobs require relocation. Yeah, like meeting a lot of people that I wouldn't have necessarily met in like my very small hometown. Obviously Abate has like a lot of connections with local studios. So yeah, you would see quite a lot of like studios at like the student union also and stuff. So it made it seem like less us and them, which was nice. So yeah, it taught me a lot. I think it made me mature a lot, which obviously you need to work in a professional environment.
Definitely.
There were team projects, because I can be a little bit bossy at times.
Okay.
I definitely like took over some of the team projects, and that kind of allowed me to like grow more confident in myself and learn about having to make decisions and make commitments and yeah, stuff like that. I think you wouldn't necessarily get it just if you were kind of learning from the internet.
Yeah, just doing the self-learning route. No, you've actually mentioned something that I don't think I've ever discussed on the podcast. So the whole idea of relocation. So because you've worked in a lot of places. So I think it's like 5 or 6 places. Like you've worked. So it's like I'm not sure how you pronounce it. Is it Obscure Games?
Yeah, that was like a little internship I did during my second year. I think that was in Dundee.
Yeah, and then you've got 4J Studios, and then you've got Orange Bus Limited, and then this is the coolest name I've ever seen. Milk Steak and the Jelly Beans. What is that? Tell me about that. That is.
It's an Always Sunny reference. Always Sunny in Philadelphia. Yeah, that was our Dare to Be Digital team name.
Oh right, okay, awesome.
We had the best logo. It was done by Ellen Brown, who I think she works in Edinburgh now. So
okay.
Yeah. Yeah, that was we even made like a robot out of tinfoil that like it was a good fun. That was a good summer.
No, that's a great name. Can't go wrong with that one. No, but this is the great thing. So when it comes to obviously art in general, and obviously we both went to Dundee. So by the way, everyone who's tuning in, make sure to check out Abate University. It's a place that I highly recommend. And no, but obviously speaking of this whole idea of like moving back and forth and like relocating. Obviously you said obviously you learned a lot from it. Would you say if you were to give anyone advice on relocation, is there any sort of tips you would give them?
I'd say it gets more difficult as you get older.
Okay.
It's a lot easier at uni because everyone's new. So I'd say definitely be open to like checking out like meetup groups in the area. Purely from like a social point of view, look to join like local things going on, because it might not always be that easy to develop a friendship group. So I think I'm very lucky that I have really good friends at coaching. Like they are like my best friends.
Awesome.
But it took me a long time to find a friendship group outside of games, because sometimes you need that like little break from game dev. It took me like a few years of living here in Newcastle probably to develop that.
Yeah.
And then in terms of more like financial stuff, I guess just read forums about cost of living in the area and try and get as many perspectives about like renting and what the council tax is like. And obviously I can't comment too much about moving abroad because I've never worked in a different country. But it would probably be the same applies, like just find out kind of safe areas as well. Like make sure you know the area that you're planning on moving to, because obviously every place and every part of the world has good parts and bad parts. So try and look on forums, and Reddit as well is a good one for it.
Yeah.
Just a lot of research.
Awesome. No, thank you so much for that. Because the reason why I wanted to bring up, because I'm also moving at the moment, so I'm moving back to Edinburgh next month, and so I've moved 13 times in the last 6 years, I think.
Oh wow, that's a lot.
So I've been like moving back and forth everywhere. Like I've literally lived in pretty much every city in Scotland, and it's just like I understand that it's very daunting at times for some people. Obviously, like you said about the social aspect. So like we're all different, and some people are more like you nailed it when you said the whole topic of maturity. And obviously like we have our family as well and stuff. Like obviously you're going to get the support, so like it's nothing to stress about. It's all about taking your time and being patient, and like Hannah said, making sure you do the research and really look into things before you kind of go ahead, because you never know. Like a lot of people say things online, especially when it comes to accommodation, that it may look great and perfect, but until you actually maybe go and visit the place, you don't know for sure, if you know what I mean.
Yes, yeah, I've made like a risky move before where I thought I knew the area, and I did. I just didn't know what the area was like after 9 p.m. and it turns out it was not safe at all.
Yeah.
I only lasted 6 months in that place, so yeah, definitely do your research, because it'll cost you a lot of money as well if you get it wrong.
Yeah, like that's always the scary thing. Like I understand, like this is why I highly recommend. Well, this is actually a random one, but this just came to my mind. Is like, do you know when you have to, like when you're studying, a lot of people make the decision whether or not to actually work, like have their own job at the side. I worked. So I used to work in Next, and so I worked in Next for I think 3 years, but when I got to third and fourth year, I was very like I just felt like I had to stop working just so I could focus on my art. If that makes sense.
Oh yeah, totally. I understand.
And but when it comes to like the whole sort of like for example relocating and getting things just organized, I do recommend having like a side job. Like you, at the end of the day, you need to live, you need to have financial backing and so forth. So it is important to have like what's your thoughts on having like do you think having a side job is probably like the best advice for a first and second year student? Probably.
Yeah, I worked in Game Station during the earlier uni years, but then yeah, it's the same as you. Towards in my fourth year, I just completely like knuckled down, and I didn't really. I dropped a lot of like union stuff as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because it becomes the focus then, doesn't it, to get like your dissertation and your final year project done. But yeah, I'd say yeah, having that job while you're working. Yeah, it gives you the financial maneuverability,
Mm-hmm.
but it also like it's always good to be working in professional capacity wherever it is, because it just teaches you like general life skills.
Yeah.
That you need no matter what industry you're in.
It's always the small things. Like that's what I was saying in my last podcast. So I was just talking about. So I work on the tills at the moment, and working on the tills, it goes a long way with like just being able to talk. And it's the small things, like having a conversation, and like being in the best thing about working in games is obviously being in a team and being around people that you want to be around, and just being able to just be yourself and just having the ability just to talk and stuff. It goes a long way.
Oh yeah, I mean, especially as you become more senior, or if you take on freelance work as well,
Mm-hmm.
it's very likely that you'll be dealing with clients or publishers or like biz dev types. So yeah, you definitely need to be able to be personable, I guess, and talk to people, and know when it's like appropriate to be like super super professional, and then when maybe you can scale it back a bit and have a bit of a joke.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So, well, speaking of so obviously you're now a senior artist. Was it a bit daunting when you took that next step up?
The recent switch to being like a lead on a project,
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. About a month in, I had like a total crisis of confidence. I was like, oh, I don't know anything at all. But I watched a really good talk. I've forgotten the name title. I think it was something like, I think it was a GDC talk on YouTube, and it was something like 10 things I wish I knew before being an art director or something like that.
Awesome.
and obviously I'm not an art director, but a lot of what he talked about was really applicable about how he became the director, and he felt like because he had that title, he had to have the answer to everything like straight away.
Mm-hmm.
So he put a lot of stress on himself, and then that propagated through to other team members who maybe like picked up on the stress. And yeah, I think listening to that really helped, because I was like, oh, right, okay, so I don't need to know absolutely everything. Like, no one's expecting me to be the Bible of game art. Yeah, that was really useful to kind of calm myself down a bit. And it's still daunting, because I've gone from just doing the art to managing. Well, I set up and managed the pipeline.
Okay.
And obviously I have like members of staff underneath me that I can help mentor, and I review their work and stuff, and I deal with like a lot of the meetings and the management-y stuff. So yeah, it was quite switched, and I'm still getting used to it now.
Yeah, it takes a bit of time.
It's really rewarding in its own right.
Yeah, because that's the great thing. So when it comes to the whole sort of idea of like having a title and stuff, like at the end of the day, is like the best people at it are the people who are like obviously like who are okay with accepting like the negatives and the positive, and just working together and approaching things from all different angles. So like the main thing that I learned. So I used to be one of those culprits of. Do you know when you like? I'm not sure what you were like when you were studying that, but I used to struggle with trust and trusting people when it came to like working in a team to get the job done, if that makes sense. And
oh yeah, I totally understand. I think everyone can be a bit guilty of that.
Yeah,
especially artists.
Pardon, say that again.
And especially artists, I think with it being such a creative discipline, I think everyone can be a little bit guilty of.
Yeah. Well, everyone's always like such a perfectionist. Like everyone's always like, oh, it has to be like I understand it, and that's what makes art great. Like being able to like just, I don't know, make something exactly the way you want and do whatever you want. Like that's the freedom that we all love. And but I do understand. Like it's always funny. Like well, obviously it depends. How should I say this? I better be careful what I say here. But like obviously you have to be nice to people. Like it's the main thing. And obviously when it comes to working in a team. The best thing I ever learned was understanding when to, like, say for example, say I was taking like a team, like I was the leader of a team. The best thing I learned was, like, it's cliche, but I only learned it when I was in this. I went on this sort of like camping sort of leadership course in my 5th year of education in secondary school, and I was doing this. I had to like guide people up. It wasn't Ben Nevis. What was it? The Cairngorm Mountains, and I was like, I know nothing about orienteering, so what I was like, I would pass the like the compass, etc., over to a person who actually knew how to do it, and then like the main point I'm trying to get from this is like identify who's better, like if someone's better than you at something, then pass it over to them and then learn from that. If that makes sense.
Oh yeah, totally. Yeah, it's knowing when to like not let ego or like they want to micromanage take over, and you just accept like that person knows what they're doing, and yeah, learn from them, like you say.
So the next sort of question I always like to ask is the whole sort of discussion between university and I missed a question. What would you say are the benefits of going to university?
Kind of similar to what I said before, like meeting like-minded people, I think, as well. So when you're like talking purely from an art perspective, when you're like in 6th form or college or whatever, like chances are, if you're wanting to go into an art career, you're probably one of the strongest, if not the strongest, out of that class, because not everyone doing like the art GCSE, A-level, sorry, necessarily, wants to actually go into art.
Yeah.
And then you'll find when you go to uni that you're no longer like the strongest of the class or whatever. You're now amongst everyone else who was the strongest of their classes. And I think that can do wonders for like humbling you, and also making you like, oh, right, okay, I really have to learn now. So it was good in that perspective for me anyway, to push and I mean, I was terrible. I coasted a little bit in first and second years, but I didn't coast so much that, my education suffered.
Yeah.
So it's basically like making you not rest on your laurels.
Well, you ended up getting a first class honours degree, so you did well.
Well, I pulled my socks up towards the end, totally. Yeah. And yeah, and just in terms of it's good for structured education. So if you're someone who, because some people are very good at like self-motivating, other people kind of they'll end up procrastinating a little bit. I think if you know that you're like a procrastinator or you have the tendency to do that, it's good to go to like a college or a university, because like deadlines and obviously you're paying for your education, that kind of forces you to make the most out of it.
Yeah.
Actually, the other good thing as well, which I always forget to mention, visas, because you will struggle to get into some countries for work without a visa. And sorry, you'll struggle to get a visa without a degree. Is what I'm trying to say. So that's some advice that I've heard before, that a lot, especially places with really tough immigration policies, like I think the US. I might be wrong, but I'm sure like it's a far easier if you have a degree.
Yeah,
to get.
I'm pretty sure it is.
So yeah, I definitely say it's good for if you envision yourself working abroad to. I think there's like options you can do. Like maybe you could just do like your third and fourth year and not have to do the whole thing. So yeah, it's worth bearing in mind.
No, thanks for saying that. And then like another awesome point you brought up there was so procrastination. So this is like the biggest culprit of all students, or like one of the biggest things when it comes to like, particularly when I was in Alberta, there was obviously there's always that sort of like what's the word that everyone always used to say is like crunch, basically. So everyone's like panic mode, instantly just going to the lectures all the time for the last 5 minutes. Please, if you're a student and you're tuning in, please don't do this. It is the most I don't know, it's just extra stress you don't want to add on to yourself, if you know what I mean. It's just like when it comes to like planning and being organized, like I understand that everyone works differently and we have our sort of like, for example, one of the habits I developed was like I tend to like to like I'm a lot better now, but I tend to like just to work on my own, if that makes sense. Like I just like to put my headphones on and just get to work, and like having like I'm a lot better at it now, but like having for example lots of people behind me, like when I was in like, do you know in Alberta there's white space?
Yes.
So
yeah.
In white space, if I was for example around a table in the early years, I'd be like, I just couldn't focus. Like I needed to find an area that was my comfort zone, and it tended to always be just working from home. It was always the easiest for me. But I did obviously learn through obviously surrounding myself by people and doing the group projects, etc. To work within a team. Like that was the best thing. But like to bring back up my point on procrastination, like try and keep to a structure, or try and we were actually talking about this before the podcast even started. So we were talking about sticky notes, and Hannah was saying, like, you can actually talk about it if you want. So you're talking about so you're working on a project at the moment, and like you have a to-do list and so forth that you have to work on, aren't you?
Yeah, I sticky note everything. Even not even work things. Like everything is in list format. I mean we obviously use production software in work, like Jira and Trello and stuff like that. But there's some things that you can't track on production software, and I have these like dragon sticky notes that I had to get, and my desk is just covered with them, and I never look at them. I write them and I never look at them, but it helps just to write it down.
Yeah, it's just like have something there at least.
I think just writing it down helps commit to memory. Like I'm one of the few people that still has a notebook and a pen in work.
Right. Okay.
I think everyone else just like remembers it, but I'm like there with my fountain pen, writing down everything that gets said in a meeting, because it's too much to try and hold it in your brain all at once. So.
Definitely. No, but that's a great thing that you're doing that, because so many people like so for example when I was at uni, and even when I was so I did a Disney project as well, so I had the chance to work with a mentorship sort of project with Disney, and a lot of people tend to get, I guess, either like when it comes to just being organized, like for example, like I'm the same as you, like I tend to like I just need to write something down, because if I don't write it down, then I have a chance of risking either forgetting something or missing something that's important, that maybe like for example, if I was working with you, if I didn't write it down, like I could be slowing down just production in general, if that makes sense. And like that's why I always bring up the main topic. Like the most important thing I always like to ask is bring up is the topic of questions, and like having a notebook there, just having something at least. Like even your phone, like I understand, like it depends on what type of person you are. If you like using your phone, like just having like something to write down. Like I'm trying to remember, there was an app that I used to use. It was like basically it was like a sticky mat. One of the, like it's the same sort of format, and I just write like my to-do list, and just having that there went such a long way.
Yeah, I think as well it's sometimes helpful if to order things by like effort. Like if I'm writing a to-do list, whether it's for work or just like general life stuff, I'll try and put like a little time estimate.
Okay, that's a good one.
That just comes from having to do it in work, I think, having to do it for years. But it makes things less intimidating. If you know that something's only 5 minutes and you've been putting it off, write it down in a list, put 5 minutes next to it, and then just make sure you get it done. It's the same, I guess it can be applied to coursework as well. I remember, I don't know if it's the same, but I remember there was like we had like our practical coursework, which was like the art, but we would have these like periodic kind of mini essays that were like 500, 1,000 words, which looking back then was nothing. But at the time, I would just put them off because I'd just be like, oh, it seems like so much.
Yeah.
And if I just like sat down on the night that I got them or whenever I was ready and done it, I wouldn't have got myself into, because I was guilty of doing that like panic crunch mode 3 weeks before the deadline thing too, like we all were. But yeah, if you just like sit down and get the smaller tasks done, it just frees up so much like mental space in your head.
Definitely, it makes you more relaxed just in general.
Yeah, you feel like you're working towards it. Like it's like this. It's like they say that you should make your bed every morning, because that small act of like having done something is meant to be like really good for, I don't know, positive like mental health and stuff. So
yeah, it's like creating like good habits, and like that's the thing. Like this is actually something I haven't really talked about, I guess, in general when it comes to the podcast, is like obviously I like to bring up like good things that I recommend for you guys who are listening to do, but when it comes to like small habits, like for example, like you said, so like relating to like your discussion of like doing the bed and so forth in the morning, like for example setting a good schedule, like working with time, waking up the same time every morning. Like for example, I'm the culprit at the moment, so I go to bed way too late and I get up way too early, so my schedule is just always screwed. Like for example, I've been like no joke, I think it's just because so I work in a company called Denelm. So I work in like it's like a home decor sort of like home appliances sort of store, and a lot of my shifts tend to finish at 8 o'clock at night. And pardon?
That's quite late.
Yeah, it's pretty late. So my habit is obviously when I get home is that I work after 8, if you know what I mean, so I can get the job done and just do my thing. But it's crazy. So when I look back, it's like there's still not enough structure. Like I'm always very organized in the sense, like I'm a very organized person. It's just the person that I am, in the sense that when it comes to my art anyway, I just like to keep things consistent. It's the same thing with the podcast. I just like I know if I stop doing it, I'll probably get myself into a slump, if that makes sense. And I know that the best thing to growth is purely just consistency. But when it comes to like I don't know, I know I'm going off a bit of a tangent, but just like the whole idea of crunch and all that, I just couldn't do that. It just doesn't work with me.
Yeah, I remember when about a year or two ago, we started having these like weekly art meetings in work, like all the art. It's like Wednesday, 2 o'clock or something. And we just go on the servers and we show any work we've done, whether it be personal, professional. We just have a chat, kind of like this, like just like an hour, it's penciled in.
Yeah.
And that was done to try and encourage like the art team to take more of like a passion about art, and like rather than, I mean, we have like fantastic artists on our team, so it was never really a problem, but it was just to try and like, you know, see art as like a way of life almost, and like just have discussions that, you know, maybe 3D artists aren't necessarily having, so maybe like the 2D artists will show stuff or whatever. So and a lot of this, what we took from that was, again, consistency. Like the art director would always say, even if you're doing like half an hour every night, as long as it's every night, that's better than doing like 8 hours on a Saturday and nothing for weeks.
Yeah.
It's exactly the same as in like exercise, like physical exercise. Doing like an 8-hour session at the gym,
Oh my god.
but doing like half an hour of weights or whatever for 6 weeks,
Yeah.
is going to be what builds up muscle mass. And it's exactly the same with art skills.
Definitely. No, I'm glad you mentioned the whole idea as well. Like not just the consistent aspect, but the whole idea of like the gym and stuff. So, the amount of artists. So, for example, I go to the gym 5 times a week, so Monday to Friday, and like I understand that maybe sport or some sort of fitness is not necessarily. I know this is like it's not down to me to judge people in this sense, but like most artists tend to not be into sport or into like your typical gamer, if you know what I mean. But like you said, it only takes half an hour or like a small amount of like it obviously depends on how much like energy and so forth you're putting forth and so forth, but it goes such a long way. And getting that sort of like, for example, you just said like a really great point, like you guys being at work just talking together, like a good conversation goes such a long way, and it changes the mood as well of the environment. So like if you guys are all clicking and just being yourselves, talking about 2D and 3D, so all your different skill sets and stuff, like the boost just escalates, if you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like the stuff that Cruising does is like very stylized, with it being like mobile VR.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people, like, I think there's like some people have this idea that stylization is easier, but actually it's like
I think it's completely opposite.
It's really hard, and it was only when there was more of like a marriage between the 2D and the 3D teams, and we started having these meetings, and like the 2D artists started doing breakdowns of like paintings and like old master paintings and stuff, stuff like from the 1700s,
Yeah.
and talking about like color theory and composition and stuff. That's when I think the whole skill, like the skill set of the whole team and therefore our games, started being elevated.
Mm-hmm.
So I think you can definitely see a progression in the coaching style, I should say.
Yeah.
And I think that's come from having this like organic. I don't know what the word would be.
It just everything works naturally, I guess.
Yeah, and people have understanding. So the concept artists are starting to learn more about how we make things in 3D. So I'm sure many concept artists can be guilty of it, where they'll paint these like beautiful things, but the 3D artists are like, not quite gonna work. If we've got a 60K budget for an entire scene,
mm-hmm.
we can't have anything really, really grand. So they're starting to learn more about limitations and how we break things down, and then the 3D team is starting to learn more about scene composition and overall like color palettes and stuff like that. So yeah, it's working really well.
No, that's awesome. Thank you so much for saying all that, because that's so much great information. So like everyone who's tuning in, make sure to like really think about these small things, because technically, like when it comes to like I don't know why I was addressing them as small things, because technically they're the most important thing, but we just tend to overlook them, or we tend to prioritize the art so much that we lose sight of the obvious and the priorities, such as fitness, such as just a good chat, and like these things are like the things that escalate you overall. And like obviously the main one that we talked about there is like the consistency and like the structure. Like structure is everything at the end of the day. Like my dad preaches it to me all the time, and so literally, so this is the thing I mentioned in one of my podcasts. So I used to go to secondary school about between 6 and 7 in the morning. My dad would drop me off so I could go play basketball. And my dad would not let me leave the car. So he'd be like, right, Ross, you have to work hard. So, and I'm like, so I'm just sitting there, listen, don't get distracted. So don't let anyone phase you. And yeah, he would say that every single day. So I would never leave the car until he'd say that to me. So it'd be this.
That's really sweet. That's like a really nice motivational boost.
Well, like, it's worked. Like he would do it every single day, and obviously I've done sport my whole life through my dad, and like I'm really close with my dad. But it's like it's those like getting taught the right things. I know it's like everyone has like different relationships with different people and stuff, but it's about finding people to also like escalate your energy, or just you as a person, if you know what I mean, like finding the right people.
Oh yeah, I think you always want to surround yourself with people that are supportive and encouraging, but also I think it's on the other hand, it's good to surround yourself with people that will tell you the truth as well. Like
Yeah.
if you've done like if your work needs feedback, or if you're being a bit arrogant about something or something, like it's always good to have people around you that'll
Be
kind of
honest.
yeah.
It's all true because like I'm pretty sure you'll be the same. That you do when you're in uni, like you'll ask your friend, you'll be like, "So what do you think?" And they're like, "Oh, it's awesome. You did. It looks amazing." I'm like, that did not help at all.
Yeah, I mean, I still get it now. Sometimes if I post things, I'll have my nan commenting like, "Oh, you're so talented." I'm like, "Thanks." But yeah, it's like I really want like feedback, I guess, because I can see like stuff's missing, but I'm like, oh, I'm not sure what it is. I can't quite put my finger on it.
It has like that's the thing, because you look at it for so long, and like you said something that was like I'm really glad you said. So you mentioned about the sort of the whole idea of stylized. So I talked to so I had Jasmine on the show, and I was talking to her about stylized art, and like for example, like I wouldn't have a clue where to start. Like it just doesn't click in my head. As in, like to me personally, stylized is the hardest part of art. Like I think like that sort of like particularly sort of like the style when it comes to like doing like the Blizzard aesthetic.
Yes.
Like I genuinely wouldn't have a clue what to do. Like my head is purely like, for example, your portfolio. Like I love your portfolio. Like what like the stylized. Like you like am I correct to say like you like antiques and like old stuff, like age sort of assets?
Yeah. So yeah, I like things that tell a story within the materials. So not I don't like over the top edgeware. Like I'm not a huge fan of making like post apocalyptic stuff.
Right.
I don't mind it, but in compared to everything else, I like things that just have that light wear that mean they've been like used and loved kind of thing, or been passed down through generations. Like that's the kind of realism I really like to go for.
Yeah, no, because I love your style, because it's like it's so I love making ornate things. So I made like an ornate mirror, an ornate chair. Like I could make like
Yeah, it's really nice.
oh I just like anything that's like just old and has a bit of like I'll make like my texturings. I still need to get like so my main project at the moment, well not my main project, but the asset piece that I'm working on at the moment. My main goal is texturing, because I still think that's my biggest weakness, alongside lighting. But like your texture work is like it's incredible. Like I love it, and it's the small. It's like you said. It's like not using the tools like too drastically, like you said about like the edge, where it's all these small things that makes a prop way more like you said, story driven and more believable.
Yeah, I did a talk about this in I was at Nice in Enniskillen in Ireland a couple of months ago, just before I went to Japan actually. And I did a talk there about my approach to texturing. And yeah, I talked about a lot about like don't just use generators out the box in Substance.
Yeah.
And how it kind of ties into what you were saying about people worrying about stuff being automated. Like computers and algorithms and stuff can only get us so far, and then that's when the artist needs to come in. So like I'll use generators as a base, but that's all that they are. I'll still go in and paint edgeware and use different masks and stuff and combine effects to get the kind of edgeware that I want. I'd never just use like the metal edges filter, for example, and slap it on, because edgeware in real life, like nothing is that like formulaic. Like there's reason things chip in certain places.
Oh, that's a new wait. What was that word you said there? I need to learn that one. What's that?
Formulaic.
What's that mean?
As in like it doesn't follow a formula.
Oh right, okay. I sound so stupid, but anyway, I've learned a new word every day. It's always important.
Yeah, it's just been like thinking about why an object might be damaged in the way that it is, and again that's where the storytelling comes in. 'Cause, yeah, nothing in life is black and white, is it? So
definitely. No, that's the great thing as well, because so for example, you said earlier about so I remember you did a post on Twitter of you were doing like a masterclass study. I think it was a masterclass. So I think you were in Japan at the time, and am I correct? It was like it was like a mini boat. Maybe I'm wrong. Did you do it? It was like a painting of, or like it was like the sea, or like it was not the sea, but it was like a mini little lake or something. It had a boat on it, and it was around.
Two ladies, yeah. It was a master's study because I really enjoy painting, and I would always encourage any 3D artist to at least try and draw and paint a little bit. Like even if you're not good at it, like it's so supplementary to 3D. And yeah, so I bought an iPad in August last year because I don't have the time to paint as much anymore because I have to keep up with my 3D skills. So the iPad was bought really so anytime commuting, I could paint. So it removed dead time out of my schedule, for example. So yeah, I took the iPad to Japan with me, and we were on the bullet trains a lot. So I was doing a master's study. And one of the most challenging things that I find is if I get like a really low res image, you know, like someone's taken a photo of a painting at a gallery or something, and it's in like 500 pixels wide. I can't copy it 1-to-1 anymore because the resolution's just too small. So I have to that's where I have to properly use my brain and try and paint as I think he or she'd painted.
Yep.
Yeah, I think it's challenging and it's frustrating, and I don't often get it right, but it's a really good exercise.
It's part of like the learning aspect, because what like you mentioned like another good point there. So for example, I'm not sure you've heard of them. So there's one guy who who's like helped me or mentored me in a way for many years. His name's Fraser McLean. So he wrote a book called Setting the Scene. He worked at Disney, and basically, so I'm going to be doing a podcast as well. Hopefully with him soon. But he was saying something that I don't know why I wasn't really thinking of it, but so I was asking him like, what's the biggest mistake universities were teaching, or I wouldn't say they were making, but they weren't highlighting enough, and it was basically too many people use reference from Google, or like they particularly for artists and stuff. Like obviously it depends on where you are and like what you have available to you, but he was always saying the best way to improve is like observation through actually being out in the real world. And like the common mistake he said that particularly for characters and like animals is that everyone would always get the scale wrong no matter what, or the forms would always just look weird, or like what's that favorite famous word is like uncanny valley or something like that. Uncanny valley.
Oh yeah, like when you can sense that. It's like an instinctual reaction because we can sense something's not quite right. Yeah.
It's like he was like saying like that just wasn't. I don't know. He just in the art pieces, like particularly for example, like I'm a culprit of this as well. Do you know, like when you look at ArtStation too much?
Yes.
And you're just like speaking like you just said there about the generators thing. Like I was one of those culprits in the sense that I don't know, like I would always over exaggerate things far too much.
Mhm. Yeah, the only thing you should be over exaggerating is your bevels. But yeah, the texturing. I was like that with rendering actually. Like I only recently learned how to present my work properly because I wasn't in a similar way to I think some people don't necessarily treat texturing as like a full pass.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't treating rendering like a full pass. Like I wasn't treating it as like a stage of the art process. I was just thinking, oh right, my work's done, get it online. Yeah. But it's its own thing, and so I watched a couple of tutorials about that to really like teach me to learn to love to render as much as I love texturing.
Yeah.
So that was a mental shift I had to make.
Because all at the end of the day, it all has to come together as one. Like I understand that like the workflow. Like, obviously, you're not required to, like obviously. Take what I'm saying, what's the phrase, a grain of salt, I don't know what the phrase is, but you know what I mean. So obviously you want to like specialize in things as much as you can. Like obviously, like so for example, my main thing is modeling. Like that's my passion, like, or sculpting, should I say. ZBrush is my main thing. But you need to not overlook the other aspects, because you need to, at the end of the day, like going right back to the start of the podcast, like you said, probably the most important part that universities need to highlight is pipeline workflow. And unless you understand that, like you're not highlighting to the recruiter that you can do the job.
Yeah.
So that's this. If you know what I mean.
It's like the director as well. You have to impress whoever it is at the company that they they can trust you, because there'll always be an onboarding process, no matter how senior or not you are. Like, there'll always be an onboarding process when you go to a different company. But the shorter that onboarding process can be, the better. So if you can demonstrate that you already have an awareness of like who you'll be answering to, like who'll be reviewing your work, kind of roughly what kind of poly count you need to work in, what software they use, like when the review processes are as well, like when do you get sign off for things, just and like stuff like naming conventions and organizing your files. I would actually say one thing that I really, really, really wish artists got taught was what source control is.
Oh, right, okay, awesome.
I'd say like the majority of people, if it's like their first gig in the industry, don't know what it is. And it's quick enough to explain, but I think it's one of those things that all companies use. So, and you're always going to be working with it.
Yeah, definitely.
Because your art committed to the server. So, I definitely think there should be some awareness. It's something you can cover in like one lesson. So I definitely think it's something that should be brought up.
Yeah, like I'm glad you said that. I'll be like I'm always honest in the sense like I'll openly say like even I'm not an expert. Like there's still so much things that like I need to get way more efficient at. Obviously, like I try to keep everything as structural, very structured and as professional as I can. But there's still so many things that I really need to start escalating in terms of to make things just more efficient in general.
Okay.
But no, yeah. I'm glad you mentioned that one.
Same for me. There's still areas of weakness for me that I really need to learn. Like I've only like dabbled in Substance Designer, but if that, like, I think potentially in the next 10 years, like textures maybe will go more that way, and it's something I should really get on top of before it's too late.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's like you were saying before the podcast started. Like, there's just so much. Like, there's so many overlapping bits and bobs within art as a discipline.
It gets crazy.
Everything.
Right. So, the last part of the podcast. So this is just a bit. So this is separate to the other thing I was talking to you about. But so I've got a bunch of random questions from the viewers, if that's okay to ask. So just like short and simple questions, I think. Well, I'm saying it short and simple, but it's probably not. So this is a very interesting question. So I have like obviously my own answer to it, but I'd like to hear what your perspective is. So the first question I've got from one of the viewers is, can you just be a prop modeler without working on the concept or texturing? So
yes, it depends on the project. So the project that I'm on at the moment, we don't have a ton of concepts for individual props. So I expect people to find their own reference and then make the prop. And the concepting, quote unquote, is done in like the blockout stage.
Okay.
So it's not done in like 2D. It'll be like, oh, I've kind of blocked it out. This is where I imagine the stylization to be. What do you think? And then I'll like approve it, or maybe say, oh, I think maybe, wonky that up a bit or taper that a little bit. I would say the advice I've seen is generally there's less and less prop specific roles because of outsourcing now. A lot of props get outsourced we don't do any prop outsourcing at Coatsing, but we don't just have someone that makes props. Like, we expect our artists to work in engine and to be able to do whatever we need them to, basically. So we wouldn't have them doing characters, but we might have them doing like terrain or foliage or a vehicle, for example.
Awesome.
So yeah, I think that there is still some prop only roles, but there's not as many as there used to be. Is my understanding of it anyway.
No, that's awesome. Thanks for answering that. So the next one, this is an interesting one. So I've never heard of this. Maybe it's just because I don't have the experience yet. But is it possible to have a career in both animation and modeling at the same time? This is a random one. So this is like, personally, I think it's really hard to do, or I don't know how you'd approach it.
Yeah, I think if you were, again, it depends. Like, you could maybe work as an animator for your day job and maybe do modeling on the side for like freelance stuff.
Yeah.
Or maybe if you were at like a really, really small indie studio where there was like you and 4 other people, then yeah, you could probably do both, and maybe you would have to do both, but it would probably be in like a really low poly flat color style because you wouldn't have the time to do everything. Like the game would just never come out.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's always. I mean, like for example, I don't do PBR at work really,
Okay.
but I do it outside of work. Like you can always do stuff in your own time if you find it fun.
Awesome. So the last question is, how do you get over creative block?
Oh, that is a tough one.
It is. It depends. Like, it depends so much on the person.
Yeah, again, this is like the third one. I'm like, oh, it depends.
Yeah, it's okay. That's
sometimes-
fine. There's no like kind of final answer. Just great to hear what your perspective is.
I think sometimes you have to know, like sometimes you just have to step away. Like if you're like burned out kind of blocked, then you need to step away and just do something fun and for yourself and possibly not art related.
Mhm.
If you're just if it's the kind of creative block where you haven't quite got the motivation,
Yeah.
to a degree, it's like not the most gentle of answers, but you kind of just have to power through. And sometimes what you make maybe is going to look crap because you had to power through, but sometimes it's enough to just get you over that hurdle. And then other times maybe just looking at art that inspires you or listening to a talk or a podcast. And I think there's sometimes where I listen to talks on YouTube and I'm like, oh yeah, I want to do that. Like, or taking like a little like course or something to teach you a new skill that's kind of related to what you're doing. Like there's different methods. But I would say when I've had creative block, like at work, like you can't like not do your work because you've got creative block. So sometimes you have to just power through and you have to just learn that you might come back to this thing and fix it back up. But yeah, you just have to crack on with it, unfortunately.
Awesome. Thank you so much for saying that. And thank you so much for coming on the podcast. It's been a pleasure to talk to you.
Yes. Thank you for having me. I hope I haven't rambled on too much.
You did great. You did really good. Like I said, everyone who's tuning in, please make sure to go give her a follow and check out her social media. I'll be putting the ArtStation link, her ArtStation link, etc., all in the comments below, in the description. Sorry. So make sure to check that out. If you're new to the podcast, like I said, don't forget to subscribe. That'll be much appreciated. Leave a like if you enjoyed today's episode. And until next time, we will see you in the next video. Bye for now.
Bye.